Welcome back. We are still on preparing for community engagement. In the previous module, we have talked about how to identify your stakeholders and your target audiences. After identifying these stakeholders and your target audience, the next thing you may want to do when preparing for community engagement is to assess community needs and also its assets. The learning objective of this module is to evaluate community needs and assets to inform engagement strategies and also to understand the ethical and cultural dimensions of community engagement. Assessing community needs will help you to know the needs of a particular engagement you want to engage with. It has several benefits. One of it is to contribute to informed decision making. It also helps you to allocate the resource or the resources you want to invest in your community engagement well. Another thing is it helps you to have better initiative outcome, better outcome of your community engagement initiative. Now, what is community needs assessment? A community needs assessment is a systematic process of gathering and analyzing information to identify the needs, gaps, challenges, and opportunities within a specific community or population. This needs assessment examines the causes of those gaps and helps you to set priorities for planning your community engagement efforts. Let's run through the benefits of community needs assessment. I've mentioned informed decision making. From your community needs assessment, you'll be able to get data. You'll be able to get data-driven insights that will help decision makers understand the most pressing issues and challenges within a community. You are the decision makers because you are the one working towards engaging a community. But before you will be able to make informed decisions, you need to understand the needs of this community. It also helps to allocate resources efficiently. So, when you focus on the areas that need most attention, you'll be able to invest more on these areas instead of investing on another the one you have identified using your community needs assessment. Another benefit is that it helps you to tailor solutions. It helps you to tailor solutions. When you're able to identify the needs of a community, you now know the gaps and the challenges a community is facing. You'll be able to engage that community, look towards the angle of getting solution out of your community engagement efforts. Compare when you haven't performed a community needs assessment with when you have performed a community needs assessment. You would realize that the outcome of a community engagement effort that was made on a particular need that has been identified or gaps that has been discovered in a community will be different to the one you will realize from just going into a community and engaging them without even knowing their needs. So this is a very important aspect of community engagement. So when you are preparing for your community engagement, initiative, you need to assess the community needs. You need to assess the community needs because it will help you to make informed decisions, and also it will help you to align with the needs of your stakeholders because you already know what they want, what the community is lacking, you know the challenges, you have even identified the opportunities within the community. So it will help you tailor whatever initiative you are preparing more towards the fulfilling the needs of the community. Let's look at the key steps in a needs assessment process. There is planning, data collection, analysis, we have prioritization, we also have reports and communication, decision making, and the program or initiative design. Let's look at planning. So after you have identified your stakeholders, you have identified your primary, secondary, and key stakeholders, and even your target audience. From this pool of stakeholders, you will have to identify people that you will approach to get needs, to get insights that will enable you to know or understand the needs of this community you are trying to engage. The stakeholders you have gotten from the stage of identification of stakeholders, you are not going to be using all of them when it comes to needs assessment because you now understand who to reach out to when you want to know the challenges the community is facing or the needs of the community. So under planning, you need to first have a scope. Why do you want to perform the needs assessment? It is important to note that if you already have a data that is giving you the needs the community is in need of, you don't need to conduct a needs assessment before. Maybe you already have an organization that has worked on a similar project as you. Those organizations, they know the needs of the community. Remember that those organizations would also fall under one of the stakeholders that you have identified. You may just approach these organizations to get that information from them. From this organization, you can get the needs of the community. So instead of investing resources in needs assessment, you may want to just use that information from those organizations. So if you have already defined your scope and objectives, and you can see that the information you have gotten from another organization has fulfilled that scope and objectives, there's no need for you to invest resources on the need assessment process. But if you don't have that information, you need to carry out a need assessment. The first stage is planning. You need to define your scope and objectives. Why do you want to carry out the needs assessment? What are the information you want to get out from this assessment? You also need to identify the target population or audience or stakeholders that you want to get this information from. You know you are getting data-driven insight from them. So you also need to determine the methods and data collection techniques to be used. It could be focus group discussion. It could be interview. It could be survey. You may want to interview the head of community. So the head of community falls under the key stakeholders. Remember that you have already identified them in the previous previous strategies you have used to identify your stakeholders. From this pool of stakeholders, you need to also gather the people that would be involved in the need assessment process. So it could be interview, it could be survey, it could be focus group discussion. It could also be physical meetings. It could be consultation. After that, you need to collect your data. You have planned, you have determined the methods and data collection techniques to be used. The next thing is to start gathering your data. Start going into the community to conduct your needs assessment. You need to gather relevant data, such I've mentioned it already: interviews, focus groups, observation, or existing reports. So you may want to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data means data that you can quantify. Maybe you want to know the numbers of people in that community, the numbers of residents in that community. If it is qualitative, you may want to know, okay, the kind of work these people do. You may want to categorize it. You may want to get an insight to really know how you can come into that community. After you have collected your data, you need to analyze those data. The data will help you to identify the patterns, the trends, and the gaps, because you need to know the gaps and the needs. You cannot just collect data and leave it. You need to analyze those data. And once you analyze those data, you need to interpret the findings to understand the underlying needs and challenges. Now, prioritization. Prioritization will help you to rank those identified needs based on their urgencies, because from your need assessment, you may get a lot of insights. In a community may need 10 different needs. They may have 10 different needs, but because you want to prioritize, you want to tailor your engagement effort depending on the dimension. Remember, in module 1, we talked about the multidimensional nature of community engagement. If you are coming from the social dimension angle, it's possible that the needs you have gathered from your need assessment process could capture the environment dimension. But because your area of impact is social, you may want to leave out the needs that falls under environment. That is prioritization. You need to rank the identified needs based on their urgency, their importance, and their impact, and also based on your the available resources in your own organization too. So you need to consider the available resources and constraints, so that you'll be able to rank these needs accordingly. After that, you need to report and communicate. You need to compile your findings. So these findings, you could share it with your funders. The findings, the analysis, put it into a clear and comprehensive report. You could share this with relevant stakeholders. It could be the funders. It could be the media. Because once you are presenting this report, it will also help you in planning for your community engagement better. So these relevant stakeholders you are sharing with, they could give you recommendations. They could give you insights, better insights, different from whatever you have already. Now, the next is decision making. So the data you have, the information you have gathered, your findings, the needs you have identified, the challenges, the opportunities, the gaps, you need these to make informed decisions. Because that is one of the key benefits of conducting a needs assessment. So after you have gotten the information, you have reported and communicated it, then you can use the information for what you want to use it for. The results from the needs assessment can be used to inform your decision. It can also be used to determine the strategies, interventions, or actions that will effectively address the identified needs. Because you have been able to get information, you now understand better how the community is, what can work in this community, and what cannot work in this community. From there, you'll be able to also get the cultural norms and also other ways you can communicate with the community members. You also get to know how well the community members are ready. From your needs assessment, from your data, you can get a lot of insights. Now, after this, the next step, because you now know where the needs, where the community needs is falls under, the next thing is to design your community engagement initiative. Because you now understand the needs of that community. Now you need to use that information to design initiative. For example, let's say the EP election campaign, you want to conduct, you want to engage a community. You need to understand where that community is currently are as regards to maybe voting, maybe how well people vote from that community. If people are not voting well, you need to ask questions, and asking these questions falls under conducting a needs assessment, because this needs assessment will let you see the gaps and the challenges. From these gaps and challenges will inform your decision on what kind of initiative you can design that will work for this particular community. So you can start developing plans and initiatives that align with identified needs and priorities. From this, you can ensure that the design solutions are tailored to meet the specific context and stakeholders' requirements. Because you now understand the needs, the gaps, and other things, you'll be able to know what will really benefit the stakeholders within that community, especially the primary stakeholders and the secondary stakeholders. Because most of the times, the key stakeholders, their interest could just be for maybe political. It could be political interest, it could be academic interest and the likes. So you need to focus on what really benefits the people you are targeting, because you now understand their needs. So those are the process of need assessments, conducting a need assessment. Now, let's look at the techniques you can use to conduct needs assessment. Remember that we have talked about gathering data. We have talked about getting data. We talked about data collection here. Now let's look at the techniques you can use to get this data, because the end goal of needs assessment is to get information, is to get data, is to get insights. So let's look at the techniques you can use to get these insights, to get this information, to get this data. You can use surveys and questionnaires. You can design surveys or questionnaires to collect quantitative data on the needs, challenges, and preferences from a wide range of stakeholders within that community. It could be the government, maybe the council within that community. It could be that you want to know the attitude of people towards coming out to vote. It could be the understanding of people on the effect of this effect of having more POCs at the parliament level. It could be that asking young people what they know about EU policy making. All these things could be under questionnaires. You can also conduct interviews. It could be virtual interviews, it could be group interviews, it could be individual interviews. Focus group discussion also is another technique that you can use because it facilitates open conversation. You could decide to use the town hall to 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 conduct the focus group discussion. And sometimes you could use virtual too. Virtual also works. You could decide to engage community of practice, not necessarily community of place. Document review is also there. Observations, you can observe the community activities for some days. You can start going into that community. You could decide to use their restaurant to understand how people, their thought process, their interactions, their behaviors, and so on, so as to get out information, important information and data. So you could also do key informant interviews. You can approach people who hold valuable insights or expertise relevant to the needs assessment. So it could be that you want to interview a principal of a secondary school within that community, because this principal would have maybe interacted with so many young people in that community and understand their challenges and their needs. So this kind of person can give you quality information that will benefit your community engagement efforts. Community meetings, you can decide to attend association meetings to really understand the concerns and listen to the suggestions by community members. This will help you to design your community engagement initiative better because you are now well informed. Now, after you have conducted the need assessment is for you to check the challenges, to assess the challenges. Now, it's not just about assessing the challenges in community engagement. You need to look the other way around. You need to look the positive side. You need to check what assets they also have. You don't focus too much on their challenges, their problems, the gaps they are facing in that community. You also need to check the positive things that is also happening within that community, which you can leverage on their assets, their capacity, their strengths, their resources that can help you drive your community engagement actions better. So let's look at asset mapping. What is asset mapping? Asset mapping is a process that involves identifying and visually representing the strengths, resources, capacities, and assets within a community or organization. Because you are able to map out assets, it helps you to leverage on the existing assets so as to foster positive change, development, and growth. A community that has a need also has an asset. Now, combining both, you can design your community engagement initiative or efforts based on both the needs and the strengths of that community. It will be like an holistic way of designing a community engagement initiative. For example, you want to engage a community. You already you have seen that they don't really understand the process of EU policy making. So because they don't understand the process of EU policy making, you have seen a need, you have seen a gap. And by mapping their assets, you can see that they have people of high intellectual in that community. Now you could leverage on the people that have high intellectual to do some sort of training the trainers initiative. Now, training the trainers could be that the people of high intellect will be trained on understanding EU policy making. And because these people belong to this community, they know their people, they interact with them well. they can go back to the community and step down those training. So that is another way of making the outcome of community engagement effort come out better, because you have involved both the strengths and the needs of, you have merged this strength and needs together to make sure that you have a better outcome from your community engagement efforts. So what are the techniques you can apply when you are mapping the assets of a community? You could make use of resource inventory. Resource inventory is it's you creating a comprehensive list of community assets, which includes physical resources, organizations, facilities, and individuals. You could leverage on these assets and use it to make your community engagement come out better. You could also use stakeholder interviews. You can engage with community members, leaders to identify existing strengths, skills, and capacity, so that you will be able to also leverage on this asset within the community. Instead of bringing an external resource, you can leverage on the resource within the community, and this may help you to reduce um, your the way you spend, or even help you to allocate your resources very well. It also saves time and bring out better impact. You could make use of focus group discussion. You can host focus groups to discuss and identify community assets, talents, and unique attributes.